Hello and welcome to the editing process from idea to published. This webinar will be all about, as you may have guessed, the editing process. If you don't know me, I'm Amanda Shofner. You can find me at amandashofner.com, obviously, but you can also find me at thepathofleastrevision.com, and that's where I do a lot of my editing and writing coach stuff. But I am also an author. I have both nonfiction and fiction books published, which means I am an editing survivor. I have been there, gone through it. I know what it's like. And I'm also a delete key lover. When it comes to editing, especially when I'm editing other people's, because it's always easier when it's not your own work, I find myself deleting. So we often overwrite. Alright, so you can tweet your takeaways with the hashtag #LeastRevision. You can connect with me on Twitter at amshofner. If you have questions at any point, you can tweet me. I am watching both the hashtag and my notifications, so I should see it. There is a delay, so if you have a question, don't wait to ask it. Just throw it out there and I will get to it. Alright, the reason that I call this the editing process, but it's idea to publish, is that you can't edit what's not there. So the first step is really to write the first draft. You have to write something if you want to get to the editing process. And the first draft is your story skeleton. It's not supposed to be what's published. You have to keep in mind that every book, especially when we're talking about traditionally published books, what you read isn't what the first draft will look like. And it's entirely possible that the first draft was not very good. And that's okay, because you can change, fix anything in the editing process, but it has to be there first. So in order to get to the editing process, you need a first draft. One tip that I have is when you are writing, it's a good idea not to edit yourself. So one thing you can do is keep a list of issues you'd like to address in the editing process so that you write it down, you don't forget about it, and then you can keep moving on. So you got to write the first draft. Use an alpha reader, number 2. This can fall when you are writing, but it can also happen after you finish the first draft. So alpha readers, they are your first alpha readers, save you additional work later on by pointing out plot holes or story problems and providing a sounding board for tough blocks. And I love alpha readers. I think they're awesome. My business name, obviously, is the Path of Least Revision, and I like it when I can cut down on how much revision and editing that I'm doing. And alpha readers are a great way of doing that, in addition to just giving you the thumbs up, because sometimes all you need is thumbs up, this is great, keep going. For pointing out plot holes, I had this happen to me with Elusive Memories, which is my first fiction book. I opened up a thread and I forgot to address it, and my alpha reader said, hey, wait a second, you didn't talk about this. So I was able to write it into the story right away. For the book that I'm working on right now, the ending wasn't all that great, so now that it's finished, my alpha reader and I will do a little brainstorming as far as what needs to happen. And my tip for an alpha reader is that you don't need detailed feedback at this point, especially if you're sharing your writing as you write it. You know, you're not looking for constructive criticism. at this point. It's really more, is it interesting? Is it engaging? Keep going. Once you've written it, once your alpha reader has seen it and maybe given you a little bit of feedback, you get to dive into the self-edit. And because your first draft is your story skeleton, now you're building on that skeleton, you're building on the foundation of it, and you are creating your story body. You're building it out. And right now, you really want to focus on content, not typos and grammar. Editing involves many different aspects, and a lot of people think that it's, I'll run spell check, make sure there aren't any typos, and I'm good. But there's a lot more that goes into it. Content on a fiction basis would include character development, plot, pacing, the dialogue, I mean, just about everything. If you're doing nonfiction, you're probably revisiting what your purpose is for writing and whether you were clear in presenting your ideas and making sure that you have enough information or that you don't include too much information, and making sure that it's relevant for the audience that you were writing for. And I have a few tips for this stage. This is always a really difficult stage because no one really likes to edit their own work, and it's something that I struggle with myself. I really kind of have to force myself to do it, but it is definitely worth it in the end. So my first tip really is to spend time away from your manuscript, and the reason to do this is when you have time away, you separate yourself from the story, and it allows you to create a little bit more objectivity, so that when you come back to the first draft, your first draft, you are looking at it with fresh eyes and you don't remember what you meant to say. Because if you don't remember what you meant to say, you will have to struggle through making it clear. I'm actually in this stage right now. I just finished my first draft of Hidden Illusions, which is book 2 in the Hunted series, and I'm going to let it sit, and I'm going to work on something else, and then go into tip 2 next week. I will print it off and read it through, and the reason, one, that I'm printing it off is because I wrote on the computer, and I want to see it in a different format. Anytime you read in a different format, you are more likely to notice mistakes. So if you write on paper, maybe you want to type it out and read it on the computer. Or if you're not into reading it on paper, maybe you want to read it on your Kindle. Doesn't matter, just use it in a different format and read it all the way through. Because when you write in bits and pieces. I wrote Hidden Illusions over many months. I think I've been working on it since June. It's been a while, and I've done it bit by bit by bit. So I need to see the story as a whole, and that's what you do when you print it off and read it all the way through. And then when you're doing that, create a needs to be fixed list, because one, you are going to find places and areas and things that you want to fix. And when you have a list, it gives you an actual to-do. The other benefit of having a list is that you have a definitive endpoint. When you address every item on that needs to be fixed list, it's time to move on. And many people can get caught here wanting to make it perfect. But it's not about being perfect, it's just making it better. because what comes next is content feedback from other people. And content feedback in this, as I'm using it, comes from beta readers, a content editor, or both. So in the process, if you were using both beta readers and a content editor, you would send it off to your beta readers first, get the feedback, make the changes, send it to your content editor, get the feedback, make the changes. Whether you use beta readers, a content editor, or both is really completely up to you based on the number of beta readers you have, the quality of beta readers you have, the amount of money you have, whether you know a good content editor you trust. There are a lot of reasons. What it comes down to is you want quality content feedback. And this stage focuses on items such as character development, pacing, plot, believability, and story arcs. Just like what I was talking about in the self-editing part and with nonfiction, you have some of the same, just making sure that your content is doing what you want it to do and that it is relevant for the people you're writing for. My tip here is to go into this stage expecting your manuscript to need work. And if you go into it expecting to need work, it's less terrifying when you get that feedback back, because you're open to it. And really, it's not going to be perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect. And your beta readers and your content editor are there to help you write the best book that you can possibly write. And so it's really not about you and how good of a writer you are. It's just about your book. And when you know it needs work, it's a little easier to take. Once you get your content feedback back and you make the changes that you need, that means you can move on to the copy edit stage. And I'm using copy edit here to also include line edits. Sometimes they're separated, sometimes they're not. This is more, to me, the nitty-gritty, concrete grammar, structure sort of stuff, which is what I like. I am somewhat of a grammar nerd. But copy edits make your writing clear, concise, and readable. It's more than just checking for grammar, because you can have a complete manuscript that's free of grammar mistakes, and it's still not a very good, readable, or concise book. And this, it kind of goes by sentence, and then, you can get into paragraph by paragraph, but it looks at each sentence and it says, is this sentence doing what it needs to do? What is it trying to accomplish? What is its meaning? Is it clear? And then if it's not, obviously, then it gets rewritten or restructured. And my tip 1 is another sort of mindset thing where everyone needs copy editing. Being a good writer doesn't mean you don't need one. I'm a copy editor. I hire a copy editor because you are so involved in your own writing that you can't see what your mistakes are, or for example, in my case, I tend to like prepositional phrases. So when my copy editor comes in, she will delete all those prepositional phrases, and she makes my book that much better. So everyone needs one. My second tip is to read your manuscript out loud before handing it to your copy editor. And the reason that you want to read it out loud at this point is because it will sound completely different, or perhaps better put, you will experience the book completely different. And you will hear sentences that don't sound right. And if you can do that before you hand it off to your copy editor, that means your copy editor will be able to focus on other things, because we can only focus on so many things. So if there are a lot of mistakes and there are a lot of sentences that need to be rewritten, the chances of more mistakes slipping through increase. And before I get into the next stage, when it comes to both content and copy editing, I want to stress that as the author, you have the power to accept or reject feedback. This is often more the case in content, but it can happen in copy editing too. I know I had someone say that I should delete a piece of information, but it was actually a little clue that came in later on in the story, and I said, nope, I have to keep this. So just remember that you do have the power to say, yes, I agree with your feedback and I will make this change, or no, there's a reason it needs to be in the story this way, and you can reject it. Now, normally when I've set this up before, I say after copy editing, you go to the proofreading, and then you go to the formatting. I'm switching this up a little bit for reasons I'll talk about in the proofreading section, but after you get the copy editing, you can do the formatting, and you have to figure out, are you publishing an ebook, a print book, or both, because they all have different formatting requirements. KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing with Amazon, that's probably the most popular one. There's Smashwords, and Smashwords can be very difficult with their requirements, and CreateSpace, which is Amazon's on-demand printing. They all have different formatting guidelines, and in reality you may end up creating 2 or 3 different files based on the format. When I published Elusive Memories, I think I have at least 3 different final formats. A Mobi for KDP, a Word doc for Smashwords, and a Word doc / PDF for CreateSpace. With CreateSpace, you do it in Word and then change it into a PDF. But anyways, format it in all the different, according to the guidelines. Here are some tips for you. The first one is expect to get frustrated. I think formatting, if you're doing it yourself, can be very nitpicky and kind of annoying, especially if you're not too familiar with, say, formatting with Word. So my suggestion to that is be a ruthless Googler. If you have a question, Google it. Search it out. CreateSpace has a great forum, I know, but you can pretty much find an answer on Google because other people have gone through the exact same process, and if you've struggled with it, someone else has too, and they've probably written about it. So while you get frustrated, remember that you can probably find your answer on Google. My last tip for formatting is to take advantage of all available resources. So for example, CreateSpace actually has templates for you to download, and they have all the formatting, the nitpicky formatting details already set in place. All you have to do is paste your book into that document. I did not realize that until I was halfway through the formatting for my print book, which is why I am telling you now. But there are plenty of resources, not just on the websites themselves, but on Google from people who have gone through the same thing and want to share. So format. Once you get all the formatting done, then you can move on to proofread. And when you talk about traditionally published books, the proofread is when the book is actually, it has been bound and it is in print form. It is the proof, that's what they call it. So this is the final check for lingering typos, mistakes, and formatting issues before you can hit publish. So the reason I flipped formatting and proofreading is because this formatting issues, you won't catch formatting issues if you proofread right after you copy edit. And this is just to make sure that nothing slipped through, you know, your eyes, your alpha reader's eyes, your beta's eyes, your content editor's eyes, your copy editor. I mean, there will be a lot of people who read your manuscript, but as tip 3 says, expect to find typos and other issues, because you will find them. It happens. So go into it expecting to find them. And I'm doing these tips backwards. So tip 2 then is to read your manuscript out loud. And the reason you do it at this stage is because you have read your manuscript so many times that your brain kind of shuts down and it's like, well, I've already read this before, and it tunes out. You are less likely to catch mistakes if you read it silently. So when you proofread, the best way to do this is to read your manuscript out loud. And most importantly, don't rush. Don't do it. Because when you rush, you will make mistakes, or you will miss mistakes. I know this happened to me when I published Elusive Memories, and then I published and I realized I had typos still, and then I had to go back and I had to make those changes after I had already published the book, which was quite frustrating. And I think to get the best, most effective proofread that you can do is to actually proofread each format that you did. So if you did an ebook format and a copy of your book, proofread both of them. My guess is you will pick up mistakes on one that you missed on the other. And I know that often we give ourselves deadlines. I have to get it out by this day, and I have to do it then. And so you feel really rushed, but rushing leads to mistakes. So just take a deep breath, let it happen when it happens. Because once you finish the proofread, you can hit publish. It's time to share your writing with the world. But this, honestly, is probably the most difficult part of the entire process. And it sounds kind of funny because it's just pushing a button, and writing and editing can be really labor-intensive and frustrating and hair-pulling. But it really is difficult to take that final step and share it with the world. I know I had one of my coaching clients struggling with this just today, afraid of moving on, hitting publish. You really have to expect to be excited and nervous and terrified, and to feel like you probably wrote the worst book in history, but that's all your self-doubts talking. You just have to trust that you wrote the best book that you could possibly write, and you've edited it to the best of your abilities and to the best of all your beta readers and alpha readers and content editors and copy editors' abilities. Because there's nothing quite like being able to have other people read your writing. So that's how you get from idea to published. Now you are set. You can go on, go through it yourself, and hopefully you will be hitting publish soon. If you would like more advice, encouragement, and so on, I highly suggest getting over to thepathofleastrevision.com and signing up on my email list, because not only do you get all my blog posts about editing and writing and all that advice, you get access to the Writing Sidekick, which is a community on Google+, and it's all about support and accountability and sharing your goals, and there are some awesome people in there. Good luck on your book.